Hi, everybody. This is going to be our diagramming sentences tutorial. Today we're going to take a look at how we actually diagram a pattern one in a series of 10 patterns. All right, so start off with the question comes up like, what are sentence diagrams? It is this old fashioned way of diagramming that I learned all the way back in seventh grade, all the way through ninth grade. I loved it. We didn't do it in high school, then I had to do it in college again. And I love it because I'm a visual person. I'm also a person who likes to get my hands onto the words. And that's what's neat about sentence diagramming. It actually forces us to actually use the words and really understand the structure of the diagram. So most diagrammers give props to sentence diagramming to the two masters for this technique. So here's one and here's this other one. This is Brainerd Kellogg, which I think really is an amazing name, Brainerd. And this is Alonzo Reed. Now, this is not really the picture of Alonzo Reed. It's the best picture I could find because the problem is we don't have much information on him. We know that he died in 1899, and we know that he worked with Brainerd to create this system. But other than that, we don't know much about him. So I put a bag over his head. All right. Now, Reed Kellogg diagramming. It is this system of diagramming, taking a sentence apart and actually learning how the individual words of the sentence all work together. And we have to actually manipulate each word into its proper position and its purpose. It really forces us to understand the sentence in its individual parts and how all those parts work together. It's brilliant. So the English language can be broken down to 10 patterns. So as I said, today we're going to take a look at just simply pattern number 1 of 10. And I grouped them into different groups, for lack of a better word. And you'll see here, we're going to take a look at patterns 1 through 3 eventually. These are all going to be to-be verb patterns. All right. So when the linguists look at the English language, they realize, okay, there are a series of sentences that have be verbs. And basically, there are 3 different possibilities when you're using a be verb. So we're going to take a look at pattern 1, one option of 3 when you're using a be verb. So we're going to call him pattern 1, for lack of a better term. And we have sort of this basic structure up here. We have NP, B, ADV, TP, which sounds like gibberish. All right. So NP is just fancy for noun phrase. All right. So we're going to call this a noun phrase. We'll also refer to it as the subject. All right. You're going to notice that the order that it goes in here is the exact order that it shows up in a sentence. So the NP is basically the beginning of the sentence. That's usually where the subject sits. Underneath that is be, and this is not standing for anything like NP stood for noun phrase. Be basically is a be verb, and there are these be verbs we have in English. So these are our be verbs: is, are, was, were, am, be, being, been. Those are our be verbs. So we'll be looking out for those. And then we have this ADV-TP. Well, ADV hopefully will register with you as being sort of an adverb. And so this is basically what we call an adverbial of TP, time or place. You see right here. Now, the reason we call it adverbial is it doesn't necessarily have to be an adverb literally, like a literal single adverb. There are times like an adverb of time could be yesterday. An adverb of place could be upstairs. But it could be something like a prepositional phrase which is sort of telling us time or place. So it's not literally an adverb, but it's adverbial. So that's why we call it an adverbial of time or place. This is the 3 items that we have to have for a pattern 1. And they don't necessarily have to go in that order. Sometimes this adverbial of time or place might move a little bit, but typically it's the order it's going to go in. So when we build a diagram, we always begin with the baseline, which is this line right here, and then we bisect it like this. And this is going to help us separate the subject from the predicate. All right, so our noun phrase is our subject, so he sits on this side, and then our be verb is going to sit on this side. So right now it's pretty logical. If I have a subject verb, I have a subject verb like this. Now down here's where the adverbial is going to be. So the adverbial, basically what it's going to do is it's going to explain when and where the subject is. When was this, or where is this? And so when something's underneath the diagram, it's always going to start off on a slanted line. And so everything underneath the diagrams are going to be built off these slanted lines, always going in the same direction. And so the adverbial is going to sit right there. Let me show you an example. All right, let's take on Christmas is tomorrow, which sounds like a great idea. So here's our subject, Christmas. Here's our be verb, is. And here's our adverbial of time or place. Tells us when is it? Time. Tomorrow. So here's our basic structure. Looks like a little cross, right? So we have our baseline. We bisected. Christmas should be here. Our be verb should be next. And then Everything else is going to go underneath it. All right? In a pattern 1, we're just going to have these 2 parts at the front, and everything else is going to go underneath it. So in this case, tomorrow is going to be our adverbial. So Christmas is when? Tomorrow. And there it goes. Answer is when, the adverbial question. Remember back, we talked about the form and structure classes. This is one of our 5 adverb questions. Makes sense. Right? And they usually connect to the verb. They don't have to, but they typically connect to the verb. Another example. The monkey is in the zoo. All right, so once again, here's our basic structure. I can see already that monkey is going to be my subject. Is going to be my verb. All right, and then I have in the zoo. I don't have a traditional adverb. This time I gave you a prepositional phrase. So it's a prep phrase that's working like an adverb because it tells me basically where the monkey is. So it's an adverb, but it's in the form of a prep phrase. So prep phrases are tricky. It still has to connect to the verb. But when I build a prep phrase, I'm always going to start off with something slanted. And so the preposition basically is going to be my way coming down. And then I'm going to take the noun and make it come across. You'll notice that nouns are always on the flat lines. So are verbs. So monkey's on a flat line. This noun's going to be on a flat line. So in a prep phrase, my 2 most important words are always the first and the last words. So this gives me a place for in. This gives me a place for zoo. All right, so let's bring those guys in. Here comes in, here comes zoo. The other thing I have is I have these determiners. If you remember, we talked about determiners with form and structure classes. So the determines there's a noun showing up. The determines there's another noun showing up. So the basically is touching monkey, and the is touching zoo. So once again, everything's always on a slanted line. So in this case, the determiner is going to sit here. It's connecting to monkey. It has nothing to do with the word is. It's describing or letting me know that the word monkey is going to be showing up. So this is where the is going to be. And zoo gets his own too. So look at this. So in a prep phrase, you're always going to have the first and last words in zoo, but oftentimes you'll have words underneath it. In this case, like the zoo, describing the zoo. There you go. Last example. The pumpkin pies are in the pantry. So here are our basics, pies and are. Here's our noun, and here's our verb. I know it looks confusing because you have like 2 nouns. You have pumpkin and pies. But if I said you can only pick one word as your subject, pies would be your subject. So to get our verb is are, our subject's going to be pies, not pumpkin, but pies. Here's our prep phrase working as an adverb. Tells us where they are. They're in the pantry. We know how to do that now. So let's add that in there. Here's in pantry. Has its own little the. It's the pies. It's the pantry. So we can add those. The pies. Here's the pantry. And then lastly, we have pumpkin. Well, pumpkin's an adjective. Now, technically, it's a noun. But it's working as an adjective. So we draw it like an adjective. So in this case, it's not describing are, it's describing the pies. So it's not going to touch the word the. It has nothing to do with the word the. It's describing the pies. So just like the has its own line, so does pumpkin. So let's get this line up here. So this adjective gets to sit on its own line. Realistically, this line can go as long as it wants to, and you can have as many adjectives down here as you'd like. In this case, I only have one, so I can put pumpkin there. If I had the delicious pumpkin pies, I'd have a place for the word delicious to sit there as well. And once again, this is still a pattern 1. The reason it's a pattern 1 is that along the top, there's a subject and there's a be verb. Everything else is underneath there. And that's what makes it a pattern 1. All right.